Apollo 12 was the second manned mission to land on the moon. The astronauts landed the lunar module within mere walking distance of the Surveyor 3 spacecraft that had landed on the moon in April of 1967. The astronauts brought instruments from the Surveyor 3 spacecraft back to Earth. Scientists used the instruments to examine the effects of long-term exposure to the lunar environment. Then in April 1970, a near tragedy turns out to be one of NASA's finest moments. 55 hours after the launch of Apollo 13, the command center at NASA heard these infamous words.
Houston, we've had a problem.
An oxygen tank on board the ship explodes, rendering the spacecraft crippled.
We've had a main B bus undervolt.
You see an AC bus undervolt there, guidance? Or ECOM? Negative, flying. I believe the crew reported it.
We got a main B undervolt.
We may have had an instrumentation problem, flying. Roger.
And we had a pretty large bang associated with the caution and warning there.
Here is a bulletin from ABC News. The Apollo 13 spacecraft has had a serious power supply malfunction that could cause the lunar landing mission to be terminated early.
Astronauts Fred Hayes, Jim Lovell, and Jack Swigert are now adrift in the vastness of outer space with no idea how they're going to get home. The world watches in shock, and NASA gets to work.
Okay, now let's everybody keep cool. We got the LEM still attached. The LEM spacecraft's good, so if we need to get back home, we got a LEM to do a good portion of it with. Okay, let's make sure that we don't do anything that's going to blow our CSM electrical power with the batteries or that will cause us to lose the main or the fuel to have RCS. But we got the command module system, so we're in good shape if we need to get home. Let's solve the problem, but let's not make it any worse by guessing.
It was decided to move the 3 astronauts into the lunar module Aquarius. Next, the 3 men would attempt a complicated loop of the moon using the lunar module's engines that had been intended cold, and the men on board encountered several problems after entering the lunar module. The crew at Mission Control worked around the clock to help the astronauts as they struggled to return safely back to Earth.
At the moment, the astronauts are continuing to try to isolate their trouble. The late report says the spacecraft now is operating on battery power alone. All unnecessary equipment is being turned off.
Because of a number of unaccounted for variables, navigating the crippled spacecraft back to Earth became a major challenge. In addition, the astronauts had to fight with rising CO2 levels in their ship, freezing temperatures, loss of power, and instrumentation control. Like the sailors of old, they had to rely on the stars to navigate their way home as billions of people back on Earth monitored the unfolding drama with TV, radio, and newspaper.
Your astronauts will come back safe.
If I may be serious for one moment and ask the entire audience for a moment of prayer for the crewmen of the Apollo 13. We'll hold silence for a moment, please.
Four days after those fearful words, Houston, as the astronauts of Apollo 13 splashed down safely in the Atlantic Ocean. Many considered it to be the space program's finest hour.
I recall, Captain, that when I spoke to you on the phone, you said that you regretted that you were unable to complete your mission. I hereby declare that this was a successful mission. From the start, the Explorer 13 dramatized its risk. The men of Apollo 13, by their under the most intense kind of pressure, epitomized the character that accepts danger and surmounts it. Theirs is the spirit that built America.
Apollo 13 did nothing to deter the American spirit of adventure and exploration. January 31st, 1971 saw the launch of Apollo 14, where in 33 hours on the lunar surface, the American astronauts collected moon rocks for analysis, took photographs, and in one of the space program's most famous and lighthearted moments, astronaut Alan Shepard hit golf balls on the surface of the moon. That same year, the Soviet Union launched Salyut 1, the world's first space station into orbit around the Earth. NASA was impressed, but they had their eyes on other missions. The Apollo program launched 3 to the moon, where numerous experiments were conducted, and astronauts even drove the now famous lunar roving vehicle, covering great distances across the lunar surface.
As I step off at the surface at Taurus Littrow, we'd like to dedicate the first steps of Apollo 17 to all those who made it possible. 99 proceeded, 3, 2, 1, ignition. Right away, Houston. Bets are good. Ag thought.
On December 14, 1972, Eugene Cernan, commander of Apollo 17, became the last man to walk on the moon, and America saw the end of the Apollo program.
Okay, 30 seconds. 308 your number.
After the Apollo missions, NASA continued to open new doors in the field of space exploration.
As you're probably well aware, we are still working on other programs, Skylab being the prime effort starting in the spring of next year. We're also working on the cooperative mission with the Russians, which will take place in 1975. And of course, we've got quite a few of the flight control team as well as other center elements involved in the work on the shuttle. So it's the start of a new era, I hope.
In July of 1976, after spending a year in spaceflight, the Viking 1 spacecraft landed on the surface of Mars, becoming the first spacecraft to safely land on the surface of another planet. Viking 1 conducted soil experiments, took 360-degree color photographs, and conducted a search for alien life. Another Viking mission landed on the surface of Mars, followed by the Mars Pathfinder mission, where a remote-operated roving vehicle explored the Martian surface collecting data. The United States followed the Russian space program by sending the Skylab space station into orbit in 1973. Skylab hosted 3 crews before it was a port of President Ronald Reagan. NASA moved ahead with a flight into space.
Beginning with the next flight, the Columbia and her sister ships will be fully operational, ready to provide economical and routine access to space for scientific exploration, commercial ventures, and for tasks related to the national security. Simultaneously, we must look aggressively to the future by demonstrating the potential of the shuttle and establishing a more permanent presence in space. I recently approved a national space policy statement, which is being released today. Our goals for space are ambitious yet achievable. They include continued space activity for economic and scientific benefits, expanding private investment and involvement in space-related activities, promoting international uses of space, cooperating with other nations to maintain the freedom of space for all activities that enhance the security and welfare of mankind, strengthening our own security by exploring new methods of using space as a means.
With rookie co-pilot Bob Crippen, piloted NASA's Space Transportation System, STS, more commonly known as the Space Shuttle into orbit around the Earth. Dubbed the Space Shuttle Columbia, the STS became the first reusable winged spacecraft to be put into practical use. In 1983, with space travel becoming almost routine and once-hailed astronauts falling into relative obscurity, Sally Ride became the first American woman to travel in space. While her historic flight fell 20 years behind Russian female cosmonaut Valentina Tereshkova, ride still captured the hearts and minds of Americans everywhere and inspired children throughout the United States to once again take an active interest in the wonders of space travel. By 1984, Space Shuttle astronauts in orbit would be the first to make an in-space repair of a damaged orbiting satellite. In 1985, 4 STS spacecrafts would complete a total